Welcome back. Just moments ago, Trump campaign advisor Chris LaCivita told NBC News former President Trump will not attend the next Republican debate in November. That comes after last night's debate, where some of the loudest criticisms of Mr. Trump weren't focused on his record or his mounting legal troubles, but rather his decision not to attend.
You know who else is missing in action? Donald Trump is missing in action. He should be on this stage tonight. He owes it to you to defend his record, where they added $7.8 trillion to the debt. That set the stage for the inflation that we have.
Donald Trump should be here to answer for that, but he's not. And I want to look at that camera right now and tell you, Donald, I know you're watching. You can't help yourself. I know you're watching, okay? And you're not here tonight, not because of polls and not because of your indictments. You're not here tonight because you're afraid of being on the stage and defending your record. You're ducking these things. And let me tell you what's going to happen. You keep doing that, no one up here is going to call you Donald Trump anymore. We're going to call you Donald Duck.
One of the more memorable lines from the night. Back with me is the panel: Betsy Woodruff Swan, Cornell Belcher, and Lonnie Chen. Lonnie, let me get you. There's a lot to break down. Let me get you first, just your reaction to this news. The Trump campaign saying he's not going to attend. That's what they're saying today. Of course, ultimately, the decision will be up to former President Trump, and he sometimes changes his mind. But what do you make of that?
It's what I expected. It makes a lot of sense after last night's debate. I don't know if you're Donald Trump, there's any reason to go to a debate like that. I had sort of thought, I wondered if his ego would allow him to stay out, given how many barbs were thrown at him. At some point, he's like, listen, I'm going to go and defend myself. But this is obviously, I think, the right political move. It's the right move given where the campaign stands and given the fact that he's got like a 50-point lead.
Yeah.
No, strategically, in this Democrat-Republican, but strategically, Donald Trump becomes a smaller figure on that stage. So if you do not allow him to get on that stage, he benefits, other candidates benefit, and you don't give them an opportunity to benefit while your candidate loses. No way he should be on that stage.
Betsy, to that point, the headline from last night just seemed to be the cacophony of candidates clashing with each other, and the fact that many times you couldn't hear what they were saying. And so if you are Donald Trump watching this, now his campaign says he didn't watch, but I bet he TiVoed. It doesn't seem like there's a huge incentive to jump into that fray.
No, it doesn't seem to benefit him at all. And I think, I don't want to be too cute about this, but today, in a lot of ways, felt like the first day of the general election. You have Biden giving this major address, setting the stage for how he's going to take on Trump, all but explicitly saying he expects Trump to be his opponent going in, and then Trump himself calling for the RNC to shut down the rest of the debates, to basically say, lights out, we're done here. And, of course, the subtext of that Trump statement is, we're wasting energy by running in this primary, but, you know, everyone on Trump's team is also thinking about money and the fact that he has these massive legal bills that are genuinely impacting his ability to campaign.
Really quickly, one of the things that I thought encapsulated all that was the woman in the focus group that y'all showed. There's a lot of great VP candidates on that stage. In the conversation.
Right. But although former President Trump said he doesn't even think they can. Let's talk about who had a good night, who did well, who didn't. I want to play this sound from Governor Ron DeSantis talking about abortion, one of the big issues after former President Trump told me wouldn't commit to a national ban and slammed DeSantis' 6-week ban in Florida. Take a look.
I reject this idea that pro-lifers are to blame for midterm defeats. I think there's other reasons for that. The former president, he's missing in action tonight. He's had a lot to say about that. He should be here explaining his comments to try to say that pro-life protections are somehow a terrible thing. I want him to look into the eyes and tell people who've been fighting this fight for a long time.
Betsy, DeSantis kind of hung back during the first debate. He certainly did make himself more known last night, and including taking sharper attacks at former President Trump. Was he effective, particularly on that issue of abortion?
It's hard to say. And the challenge for Republicans dealing with the abortion issue is that where the base is at on this question is very different from where the general electorate is going to be at. And Trump seems to understand that. The way that he is at least rhetorically trying to distance himself from the movement of people opposed to abortion, essentially signaling that he views it as a fundraising grift rather than a meaningful political movement. The way he himself is basically signaling his views of the politics here is quite different from how DeSantis is talking about.
And I think if you look at Nikki Haley, she is clearly understanding this as, how do we position this issue for a general election? She did it in the first debate. That continues to be where she is. And I think ultimately that is why you see her running in hypothetical matchups against the president stronger than any other Republican, because her positioning so far has been as, look, I can be the adult in the room. I can be the general election candidate. I can be the contrast. And she is the contrast. She's relatively younger. She obviously has the Indian American heritage. There's a lot of things about her that make her an effective contrast.
Too bad we'll never see it. I mean,
but her poll number, she is, I mean, Lonnie makes a good point, though. It's notable that in a general election matchup, she does better than any of the other candidates, according to our latest polling.
And just before when my guy ran against your guy, look, Governor Perry was running really good in a hypothetical matchup against Obama. It just never happened. Look, and when I see DeSantis now attacking Donald Trump, I think too little too late. It's so
Would it have
big.
made a difference if he'd started earlier? I mean, that's what I keep asking.
You got to try, right?
Okay.
And again, it's just campaign 101. If you want to get in front of the person that's in front of you, you have to hit them.
I think what it comes down to, though, is what these debates, the purpose these debates serve is to winnow the field. At some point, there will be a one-on-one, and that's when it's going to get really interesting. The question is it going to matter when it gets to one-on-one?
Yeah.
But that'll be the interesting
We'll
point.
see after the first couple of states.
Yeah. There was a really fascinating moment that's gotten some buzz today. It involves teachers, education. I'm going to let it play out, and we'll do some analysis on the other side.
When you have the President of the United States sleeping with a member of the teachers union, there is no chance that you could take the stranglehold away from the teachers union every day. They have an advocate inside the White House every day for the worst of their teachers, not for our students to be the best they can be.
By way of full disclosure, Chris, you mentioned the president's situation. My wife isn't a member of the teachers union, but I got to admit I've been sleeping with a teacher for 38 years.
Cornell, that line got no reaction. We should just explain Governor Christie was referencing the fact, of course, that the First Lady is a teacher.
Right.
Yes.
Well, his wife is a
Yes.
teacher. It goes down in history as one of the most awkward moments, I think, in political debates in modern era. Maybe it doesn't look that bad on radio, but on television, and just the pause and how the audience was just sitting there, silent, not a movement. It looks really awkward, and it's gonna be something that lives on the internet forever.
Lonnie, what does it say about the moment that they were in last night? Because I got the sense, and this is where we started the discussion, that each of these candidates were really reaching to try to have a moment, to try to create a moment to break through.
Yeah, you know, I've been involved in preparations around dozens of these primary debates, and you're always thinking, how do you break through when there's like 15? There were only 7 on the stage last night. But how do you break through? How do you create a moment? How do you make yourself memorable? The one-liner is the most tired way to do it. I mean, any debate coach that says, hey, I got an idea, go with a one-liner.
And then he didn't land
But they keep doing it.
He didn't land it.
I'm so worried about the next debate. What's going to happen? I don't want...
It's a question. It's an open question. Look, Senator Scott, Betsy, I thought he came out of the first debate, and Democrats, Republicans all said to me, as I'm sure they did to you, he is such a nice guy. Tonight showcased that he's such a nice guy. Last night, you could see him really ramp up. He got in there. He tried to mix it up. He had a very strong bite when he was going back and forth with Governor DeSantis on the issue of what is written in Florida's educational guidelines about slavery, for example, really speaking passionately from the heart. What did you make of his performance?
He clearly has gotten the message that just out-nicing everyone is not the way to win a Republican presidential primary. So there was certainly more of a gloves-off approach from him. His clash with Nikki Haley, of course, is really memorable, sort of a battle of the South Carolinians. In that case, he didn't seem to have done as much research as he should have on the additionally contentious issue of curtains and when Curtain Gate had its initiation, another big moment. But no question that he's trying to be a little bit less nice, a little bit scrappier. Is it going to change the way enough people will vote? TBD.
Okay, very quickly, Lonnie, did anything change last night?
I think the only thing that changed is that we're going to see one less person in the next debate, probably. I think Doug Burgum, this may have been his last debate. I think that'll be the only change.
Do you agree, Cornell?
I completely agree.
Anything else you'd add?
No.
Okay, then we'll leave it there. Betsy, Cornell, and Lonnie, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.